A good Erev Shabbos. It's good to be learning with you. Man, Shabbos can't get here soon enough. We need that piece of Shabbos, and may it bring in a broader, bigger peace. We need peace so badly. The sooner peace comes, the more lives will be saved. Please, God, bless us with peace. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Friday? Stephen in New Hampshire, Karen in Northern California, Guy in Ohio, Pauline in Chicagoland, Minnie in Alabama. Welcome, Minnie. Bill in mid-Missouri, Sharon in New Jersey, Shandora in the Bronx, Renee in Indiana, Belle in Texas. Oh, wait a minute. Let me get the YouTube going there. Okay. And Lynn in Silver Spring and Marjorie. Welcome, everybody. Did you see that picture of Nina on the Facebook page? When she needed the challah dough yesterday, she recited the names of all the hostages, praying for their release. Please, God, release all the hostages. And then a ceasefire will come. That was announced today. So please, release. May all the hostages be free and home safe for Shabbos. Wouldn't that be amazing? Okay, we are holding on page 77a, right at the top, with a new Mishna, Mishna number 4, here in chapter 4 of Tractate Kiddushin, the 20th volume of the Talmud. This whole tractate has been about betrothal and the laws of betrothal. But as we got into the discussion of which betrothal is a valid betrothal, which betrothal can take hold, what happens if a betrothal occurs between people who are prohibited from getting married, and this led us to the questions of lineage, flawed lineage, unflawed lineage. And now we're continuing this discussion, as we've seen so many times, when the temple is standing and the Kohanim, the priests, are serving there, they're held to an extremely high standard, especially, if God willing, Mashiach comes today, and with Mashiach will come the third temple, and then the priests will serve again, bringing offerings on behalf of the Jewish people. And now that so much history has passed, right, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness coming out of Egypt, okay, so the priests were only Aaron, Moses' brother, and his sons. And by the time of the first temple and the second temple, there were many priestly families. And they would serve, 1 or 2 weeks a year because there were so many priests already in the population. So now, 2,000 years later than that, still it's a very small group within the Jewish people, but there are probably hundreds of thousands of priests. So which ones will serve? It's going to be a real distinction, a real honor. And we see that there's all these laws that, just limit which of the priests can serve. And so if there's any flaw in the lineage, if a priest married a divorced woman and he had a son, so the son is a Cohen, but he's disqualified from serving because the Torah says a priest can't marry a divorced woman. There's nothing wrong with a divorced woman. Any other Jew can marry a divorced woman. Even a priest can marry a divorced woman. But if he does, while he's married to her, he cannot serve in the temple and his son cannot serve in the temple. And here are some related laws to that idea. Why is it that a priest can't marry a divorced woman? We don't know. It's just something that God said. He can't do that. And a high priest can't even marry a widow. Why? We don't know. These are chukim, right? These are the laws that we do it because God said so. And truly, if you think about it, all of the laws in the Torah are because God said so. Just because it makes sense to us that thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. Of course, these laws make sense to us, but it doesn't have to make sense to us. We do it because God said so. And we don't have the perspective that God has. There's so much in the world that we don't understand. Lately, I find myself infuriated by what's going on, the lies that are being told, the lies that are being believed. I heard a beautiful, very short presentation in a video yesterday that simply said, if the conflict in Israel was about land and the division of the land, it would have ended 100 years ago, because the Palestinian Arabs have been offered their own country over and over and over and over again. They object to the two-state solution because the two-state solution includes Israel. And what they've said over and over and over again, and not just the Hamas leadership, but throughout that world, and now you hear it all over America, in American cities and American campuses, Palestine from the river to the sea. That means no Jews. Where should the Jews go? They don't care. The Jews should be dead. The Jews should be genocided. I mean, when you hear things like that from Americans and from American intellectuals, it's infuriating. But Nina keeps reminding me, no, Sal, you can't be angry. You can't be infuriated. We can't understand how it's all unfolding, but God's got this. There may be much more individual and local tragedy that we'll never understand, but God has a plan. Somehow this is proceeding as it has to. And we got to have emunah b'tachon, right? Faith and trust in the Holy One above. But when I hear these lies being promulgated, it's tough. It's a challenge. All right, let's get back to it. 77a, Mishnah number 4. The daughter of a male halal, right? So this priest who married a divorced woman, he's a halal. Actually, he's just disqualified. I don't know if he's a halal, but his son is a halal, right? So the priest who marries a divorced woman, his son is a halal. That's a disqualified priest. So the daughter of the halal, she is unfit to marry into the priesthood forever, meaning all daughters of male descendants of a halal, all daughters of male descendants of a halal are prohibited from marrying priests, as they have the status of halalot, right, the female version of a halal. So if there was an Israelite who married a halala, right? So halala is the daughter of a priest who married a divorced woman. So if an Israelite married a halala, his daughter is fit to marry into the priesthood, right? Because that woman, her father is not a halal. Her father is just a regular Yisrael. His mother is a halala, but the daughter of a halala by a Jewish man, a Yisrael, who's not a priest, she can marry into the priesthood, right? So his daughter's fit to marry into the priesthood, whereas if there was a halal, the son of a halal, who married a Jewish woman, his daughter is unfit to marry into the priesthood because her father is a halal. So Rabbi Yehuda says the daughter of a male convert is like the daughter of a male halal, and she is also prohibited from marrying into the priesthood. That's Rabbi Yehuda, not the majority view. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov disagrees and says if there was an Israelite, right, so a Jewish man who's not a priest, who married a female convert, his daughter is fit to marry into the priesthood. And similarly, if there was a convert who married a Jewish woman, his daughter is fit to marry into the priesthood. But if there was a male convert who married a female convert, his daughter cannot marry into the priesthood. With regard to both converts and emancipated Canaanite slaves, their daughters are unfit to marry into the priesthood, even up to 10 generations, and this law applies to the offspring until the mother is born Jewish. Rabbi Yosei says even if there was a male convert who married a female convert, his daughter is fit to marry into the priesthood. That's the Mishnah. Here's the Gemara. What is the meaning of this statement that the daughter of a halal is unfit forever? So the Gemara explains, it is necessary to say this, lest you say that the law should be just as it is in the case of an Egyptian convert and an Edomite convert. And that just as there, with regard to an Egyptian and an Edomite, their descendants are permitted to enter into the congregation after 3 generations, so too here the daughter of a descendant of a halal should also be married into the priesthood after 3 generations. You might think that, and the Mishnah therefore teaches us that this prohibition is permanent. So the Mishnah teaches that but it's permanent as long as she's the daughter of a halal, who's the daughter of a halal, who's the son of a halal, the son of a halal, right? Once she has a father who's not a halal, then she can marry into the priesthood. So the Mishnah teaches that in the case of an Israelite, right, so a Jewish man who married a halala, the daughter of a halal, his daughter is fit to marry into the priesthood. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? And Rabbi Yochanan says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, that it is stated here, and he shall not profane his offspring among his people, Leviticus 21:15. And it is stated there, he shall not defile himself, being a chief man among his people. So just as there, the prohibition against a priest contracting ritual impurity, tuma, from a corpse, right? A priest can't enter a cemetery, can't assist in a funeral, except for his own parents, and perhaps some other relatives very close to him, but only them. Otherwise, a priest is not permitted to become tameh, to become ritually impure for the dead. So just as there, the prohibition against a priest contracting tuma from a corpse applies to males, but not females, right? Because the daughter of a priest is not included in that prohibition. So too here, with regard to the profanation of his offspring, where the term among his people is also employed, it is males who are rendered unfit and who render their daughters unfit to marry into the priesthood when they are halalim, but not females, right? So in other words, a halala who marries a Jew or a Yisrael, their child, their daughter, can marry into the priesthood. So the Gemara asks, if that is so, that this idea of profanation applies only to the male offspring of priests, then the daughter of a high priest, if that is so, that profanation applies only to males, the daughter of a high priest, and a widow, if so, that profanation applies only to males, then the daughter of a high priest and a widow should be permitted to marry into the priesthood, and there should be no status of halala. And the Gemara rejects this. Is it written that his son is profaned? It is written his offspring, which includes his daughter. As the verse reads, he shall not profane his offspring among his people. Nevertheless, the daughter of his halala daughter, who is already the 3rd generation, she is permitted as a result of the verbal analogy. Now the Gemara asks, if so, that the granddaughter is permitted as a result of the verbal analogy, the daughter of his son should also be permitted, right? But it's not. It's the daughter of his daughter is permitted once she marries a Yisrael. But his son, who is a halal, if he has a daughter, right, then the granddaughter of this priest who married a divorced woman, his granddaughter is not permitted because she's the daughter of his son, who's a halal. If she was the daughter of his daughter, then she would be permitted, right? So the Gemara answers, it is written, he shall not profane his offspring, by which the Torah links his offspring to him, his offspring. So just as for him, his daughter is unfit, so too for his son, the son of a high priest, his daughter is unfit. And the Gemara asks, in that case, the daughter of his daughter from an Israelite should also be prohibited, just as his own daughter is unfit. And the Gemara answers, if so, that his daughter's daughter was also to be unfit, of what use is the verbal analogy? He shall not defile himself, being a chief man among his people. It must teach that his daughter's daughter is fit. Slightly new subject. The Mishnah teaches that if there was a halal who married a Jewish woman, his daughter is unfit to marry into the priesthood because he's a halal. The daughter of any halal, whether the halal is a halal because he married a divorced woman or because his father married a divorced woman, the daughter of any halal cannot marry into the priesthood. And the Gemara questions this ruling. But wasn't this already taught in the first clause? The daughter of a male halal is unfit to marry into the priesthood forever. The Gemara answers, since it taught in the first clause about an Israelite who married a halala, it also taught in the latter clause about a halal who married a Jewish woman to present the complete ruling. So the Gemara comments, the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Dostai ben Yehuda. As it taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Dostai ben Yehuda says, just as the sons of Israel are a ritual bath of purity for halalot, right? Because the halala, right, the daughter of the halal, she cannot marry into the priesthood. But if she marries a Jewish man who's not a priest, a Yisrael, their daughter can marry into the priesthood. Therefore, Jewish men act like a mikvah to purify the halala so that her daughter can marry into the priesthood. That's what they're saying. So just as the sons of Israel are a mikvah of purity for halalot, i.e. the daughter of a halala who marries a Yisrael does not transmit her status of a halala to her daughters, and so her daughters may marry priests. Well, so too, the daughters of Israel are a mikvah of purity for halalim, and their daughters may marry priests. No, that's not true. That doesn't work the other way. So the Gemara asks, what is the reason of Rabbi Dostai? So Rabbi Dostai is a minority view here. What is the reason of Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yehuda? And the Gemara explains that the verse states, he shall not profane his offspring among his people, which teaches it is among one people that he profanes, i.e. the offspring is a halal only when he and his wife are both profaned, i.e. when a halal marries a halala, then their daughter is prevented, but otherwise no. But among two peoples, he does not profane. If the mother is of a different people, i.e. she is not a halala, then the offspring is of unflawed lineage. That's according to Rabbi Dostai. Now the sages taught, the verse states that a priest may not engage in intercourse with a woman who is forbidden to him, so that he shall not profane his offspring. Now I have derived only that his offspring resulting from a union with a woman forbidden to him is profane, right? If the divorced woman is prohibited to him, so his son by her is a halal. That's what it means that his offspring was profane, because he cannot serve in the temple. Now, from where do I derive that she herself, i.e. the woman who engaged in forbidden intercourse with the priest, is also disqualified from marrying into the priesthood? So in other words, she's disqualified anyway, but the priest marries a woman who is prohibited to him. Okay, now obviously if she's a divorced woman, then even if this priest who married her now dies and she was divorced first and then widowed, she remains prohibited to marry other priests because she's still a divorcee. But what if, for example, you have a woman who is prohibited from marrying a priest because they're related, right? It's incestuous, maybe siblings, maybe something else. But she slept with this priest, right? So now she has become profane in the sense that she can't marry other priests because she already slept with one priest that was prohibited to her. So from where do I derive that she herself, this woman who engaged in forbidden intercourse with the priest, is also disqualified from marrying into the priesthood? I mean, it might be enough to say that she just simply slept with a priest, right? Not for the purpose of creating betrothal. I mean, she just had, licentious sexual relations with this priest. So he's prohibited to her since it wasn't for the purpose of getting married. That would make her a zona, and therefore she now is also a halala who's prohibited to marry any other priest. Now you can say, how do we know this? You can say it is a kal v'chomer inference. If his offspring, who did not commit a transgression, is profaned, is it not logical that she, who did commit a transgression by sleeping with a priest, is similarly profaned? And the Gemara responds, well, he, the priest himself, would prove otherwise, as he committed a transgression, but he is not profane. The fact that this priest slept with a woman who's not his wife, that not for the purpose of marrying her, it's going to render her a halal. She can't marry any priest. But the priest who slept with her, he, as long as he's not married to a woman who's prohibited to him, remains qualified to serve in the temple. So he is not profaned the way the woman is profaned who slept with him in a prohibited union. Why isn't he profaned the same way? I don't know, but he's not. Although he may not serve in the temple while he remains married to a woman who's prohibited to him, he regains his status as a fit priest once he divorces her. Now the Gemara rejects this as a proof that it should be that the woman who sleeps with a priest is rendered unfit to marry other priests because he's not profane, she should not be profane, but that's not the case. And the Gemara proves this like this. What is notable about the priest? He is notable in that he is a male. And in no case is a male priest profaned by engaging in forbidden intercourse. Now, if he engages in forbidden intercourse, he's committed a sin. He's going to have to bring a sin offering and face other consequences. But he's not rendered disqualified to serve as a priest by that action. Now, will you say the same with regard to her, a woman who is disqualified from marrying a priest in all cases? For example, if she engages in intercourse with a man of flawed lineage, she assumes the status of a zona and is permanently disqualified from marrying into the priesthood. And if it is your wish to say that this reasoning is faulty, there is a different proof. The verse states, he shall not profane his offspring, which means that the priest may not engage in intercourse with a woman who is forbidden to him, so that someone shall not become profaned, their child. So the verse is referring to this woman or herself. This verse is referring to this woman who was at one time fit. She could marry any priest, and then she became profane by sleeping with a man who is forbidden to her. In other words, the term profanation, someone is profaned, does not apply to his offspring as they were never fit to begin with. Rather, it is referring to the woman with whom he engaged in intercourse as, since she was initially fit to marry into the priesthood, she can be described as becoming profane, right? So it must be that since she was fit to marry into the priesthood, it's not that the prohibition of the priest marrying her is because she's divorced. It's some other prohibition that means that this particular priest and this woman cannot marry each other. They slept together anyway. That's what's going to render her disqualified from marrying any other priest. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of, if it is your wish to say that this reasoning is faulty, in what way is it faulty? And the Gemara explains the counter argument. And if you would say that the Kal V'chomer argument can be refuted like this, what is notable about his offspring? He is notable in that he is formed through a transgression. Since the woman herself was not formed through a transgression, one cannot derive the law pertaining to her from that of the offspring of this union. So the Gemara therefore continues that even if one were to state that particular counter argument, the verse itself nevertheless states, he shall not profane his offspring, which means that the priest may not engage in intercourse with a woman who is forbidden to him, so that someone, meaning the offspring, shall not become profane. And the verse is referring to this woman or to the offspring who both become profaned by the prohibited intercourse. Now it says the verse is referring to this woman who was at one time fit and then she became profane. The sages taught, who is a halal? The term is referring to any woman born from people of flawed lineage. So the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of people of flawed lineage? If we say it means that she was born from someone unfit for him, meaning a woman forbidden to this particular man due to a family relationship, or some other reason, isn't there the case of one who remarries his divorcee after she had been married to someone else in the interim? She is unfit for him, and yet her children are fit. As it is written with regard to this case, that is an abomination. And this is interpreted to mean that marriage is an abomination. But the children of that marriage are not an abomination and are entirely fit. Right? This is not the child of adultery who is a mamzer. This is the child of a man who remarried his divorcee after she was with someone else. Now, this is prohibited, but if they do it and they have a child, apparently that's not a mamzer. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, this is what the sages are saying. Who is a halala? The term is referring to any woman born from one unfit for the priesthood. That's what a halal is, not just one who, from some other kind of prohibited union. It's always involving a priest. So the Gemara questions this. Well, this implies that one who was born, yes, she is a halala, like the daughter of a priest who married a divorced woman. But one who was not born from one unfit for the priesthood is not a halala. And yet, aren't there the cases of a widow, a divorced woman, or a zona who engaged in intercourse with a priest? They weren't born halalas, but after they committed that action, they become a halala, right? So the divorced woman who marries a priest, she wasn't a halala before, but she became a halala when she did that. So Rabbah said, this is what the sages are saying. Who is the halala mentioned that did not have a moment of fitness at all, but was unfit from birth? Okay, she is any woman born from one unfit for the priesthood, right? She is the one, the daughter of this priest who married somebody, who he's prohibited to marry because she's a divorced woman or she's a zona, or if he's a high priest, she's a widow. So the daughter of that union, she was a halala from birth, right? So that's the halala from birth. So the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the term mentioned? Where was she mentioned? Rav Yitzchak bar Avin says, this is what the sages are saying. Who is the halala whose prohibition is rooted in the words of a verse in the Torah, and it is not necessary to clarify her prohibition further by the words of the sages? She is any woman born from one unfit for the priesthood. With regard to such a woman, the verse explicitly states, he shall not profane his offspring. By contrast, the law that a woman who engages in forbidden intercourse with a priest, that she becomes a halala, this is not written explicitly in the written Torah. It is derived by the sages by rabbinic decree. Now, the sages taught, if a high priest engages in sexual intercourse with a widow, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. I didn't repeat it 3 times. It's written 3 times, right? The sages taught, if a high priest engages in sexual intercourse with a widow, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. So right away, we're wondering, what does this mean, a widow? Does that mean he slept with 3 different widows? Or he slept with one widow 3 times? Similarly, if a priest engages in intercourse with a divorcee, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. Same question. If a high priest engages in sexual intercourse with a woman who was a widow, and then was a divorcee, and then was a halala, and then was a zona, when the changes to her status occurred in that particular order, right? So she was a widow, right? She was married and the husband died. Then she was a divorcee, so she married a second time and divorced. Then she was a halala, presumably because as a divorcee, she married a priest and that made her a halala. And then a zona, because I guess she then slept with a priest without marrying him or slept with anyone outside of marriage. That made her a zona. So those statuses came in that order. That she was first widowed, then remarried and was divorced, and subsequently engaged in intercourse with a priest, thereby becoming a halala, and then she engaged in intercourse with a Gentile or a forbidden relative, thereby becoming a zona. The high priest is liable to receive lashes for each and every one of these transgressions each time he engages in intercourse with her, right? So if he engages in intercourse with her once, he gets lashed 4 times because he slept with a widow, because he slept with a divorcee, because he slept with a halala, and because he slept with a zona, even though it's all the same woman. By contrast, if she first became a zona by engaging in intercourse with a Gentile or forbidden relative, and then she became a halala by engaging in intercourse with a priest, and then she became divorced and remarried, and then she became a widow, a high priest who now engages in intercourse with her is liable to receive only one set of lashes, right? So why does the order in which she assumed these statuses affect the outcome of this high priest who slept with her one time, whether he gets 4 sets of lashes or only 1? So the Gemara is now going to explain this baraisa. The master said in the baraisa, if a high priest engages in intercourse with a widow, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. So what are the circumstances of this widow? If we say that he engaged in sexual intercourse with 3 different widows, call them Reuben's widow, Shimon's widow, and Levi's widow, why is he liable to receive only one set of lashes? If he slept with 3 different widows, he should get 3 sets of lashes. Aren't they separate bodies, different people? Aren't they labels, like names, of separate prohibitions, since each one is forbidden in her own right? It is therefore clear that he would receive a different, he would receive lashes for each widow he happens to sleep with. So rather, perhaps we're talking about a high priest who engaged in 3 separate acts of intercourse with one widow. That's what the Mishnah meant when it said one widow, one widow, one widow. Okay? I mean, a widow, a widow, a widow. So what does that mean? So what are the circumstances? If they did not forewarn him between each act, right? Remember that to receive lashes is a form of corporal punishment like the death penalty. And in both cases, you don't get the punishment unless right before you did the act, someone said to you, hey, if you do that, you're going to get lashes. They said that to you in front of witnesses, and then you did it anyway immediately after you heard the warning. That would be the only time you could actually get those lashes. So now they're bringing out that part of the requirement in order to receive lashes. So if they did not forewarn him between each act, it is obvious that he is liable to receive only one set of lashes, for one must be forewarned in order to be liable to receive lashes. And here he was forewarned only once for all 3 acts. So there would be no need to state this law. So rather, perhaps the case is that they forewarned him for each and every one of his acts of intercourse. But if that were the case, why is he liable to receive only one set of lashes? But didn't we learn in a Mishnah, Tractate Nazir, a Nazir who was drinking wine in violation of his Naziris the entire day, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. If they said to him, do not drink, i.e. that he was forewarned several times and he nevertheless drinks, then he is liable to receive lashes for each and every time that he was warned and drank anyway. We're well into 77b now. The Gemara answers, so no, it is necessary for a case where he engaged in sexual intercourse one time with Reuben's widow, who was previously Shimon's widow, who was previously Levi's widow. So lest you say they are separate labels of prohibitions and he should be liable to receive 3 sets of lashes, since she was widowed from 3 different people, the Baraisa therefore teaches us that we require separate bodies for him to receive separate punishments, and as that is not the case here, he is liable to receive only one set of lashes. So the Baraisa teaches that if a high priest engages in sexual intercourse with a woman who was so it must be when it said a widow, he gets one set of lashes because even though she was widowed 3 times, and by the way, we learned elsewhere that if a woman is widowed 3 times, you shouldn't marry her because not a good pattern. So here it says the Baraisa teaches that if a high priest engages in sexual intercourse with a woman who was a widow, and then she was a divorcee, and then she was a halala, and then she was a zona, all the same woman, if the changes to her status occurred in that order, he is liable to receive lashes for each of them. The Gemara asks, what does this Tana, this rabbi of the Mishnah, hold? If he holds that a prohibition takes effect where another prohibition already exists, i.e. if an item or a person is rendered forbidden by a prohibition, and then another prohibition can take effect in addition to the first one, that she's both a divorcee and a widow, and if he sleeps with her, he's going to get 2 sets of lashes because of that. That would be a prohibition taking effect on top of another prohibition. Well, then the reverse should also be the case. I.e., if she was initially a zona and subsequently became a halala, the same 2 prohibitions should apply to her. What difference does it make what order it happened in? And if he holds that a prohibition does not take effect where another prohibition already exists, he should likewise not be liable to receive more than one set of lashes, even if they occurred in this order. Why does the order matter? So Rava said, in general, this Tana of the Mishnah does not accept the principle that a prohibition takes effect where another prohibition already exists. But he holds that it does take effect in the case of an expanded prohibition. If the second prohibition adds people to the category of those to whom the item is forbidden, then it takes effect in addition to the previous prohibition, which had a more limited range. So now we understand, right? A divorcee is prohibited to all priests. A widow is also prohibited to a high priest, right? So if she starts by being a widow, then she's only prohibited to the high priest, and then she becomes a divorcee. Okay, so now she's prohibited to the high priest and to other priests. So it expanded the number of people who become prohibited to her. So that's the expanded prohibition. That's that idea. So in this case, a widow is forbidden to a high priest, but she's permitted to a common priest. Once she becomes a divorcee, since a prohibition has been added to her with regard to a common priest, as a common priest is prohibited from marrying a divorcee, the prohibition is also added to her with regard to a high priest. And at this stage, she is still permitted to partake of teruma if she is the daughter of a priest. When she becomes a halala by engaging in sexual intercourse with a priest, since a prohibition for her to eat teruma has been added, the prohibition with regard to a halala is also added with regard to a high priest who engages in intercourse with her. In addition to the prohibitions of a widow and a divorcee, it is only if they occurred in this order that each prohibition adds to the previous one, but not if they happened in the reverse order. And yet, one could ask, but in the case of a zona, what expanded prohibition is there with regard to her? There is no additional prohibition with a zona beyond what is prohibited with regard to a halala. Rav Chana bar Rav Katina said, since the label of zenut, zona, disqualifies her in Israel, it is viewed as an expanded prohibition. What does this mean? Although a zona, as precisely defined in this context, is a woman who engages in sexual intercourse with one who is unfit for her, she is prohibited only to priests and does not add any prohibition beyond that of a halala, the label of a zona in its broader sense, such as a married woman who commits adultery, does disqualify her to an Israelite, namely her husband. Therefore, there is a prohibition with regard to a zona that has a greater scope than the prohibition with regard to a halal. Now, a Tana taught a Baraisa before Rav Sheshas. The command addressed to the high priest states, right? Leviticus 21:14, a widow or one divorced or a halala or a zona, these shall he not take, but a virgin of his own people shall he take to wife. Right? That's the high priest. Not only is he only permitted to marry a woman who's never married before, he can't marry a divorcee or a widow, but in addition, it's a positive commandment. Not only does it exclude that he can't marry anyone who wasn't married before, but he also has to be married. We've learned that elsewhere. Now, any woman who is included in the mitzvah, shall he take, is included in the prohibition, shall he not take, if she becomes a widow or a divorcee. And any woman who is not included in the mitzvah, shall he take, is not included in the prohibition, shall he not take. So this excludes the case of a high priest who engaged in intercourse with his widowed sister. As his sister, she is forbidden to him, even when she is a virgin. So the mitzvah, shall he take, does not refer to her. Therefore, he does not transgress the prohibition, shall he not take, if he engages in intercourse with her after she had been widowed or divorced. He doesn't violate this prohibition. Obviously, if he sleeps with his sister, he violates the prohibition on incest. It's just that he wouldn't be triggering this particular prohibition. Rav Shesha said to him, he who said this to you, in accordance with whose opinion did he teach it? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says, as a principle, a prohibition does not take effect where another prohibition already exists. Therefore, his sister, who is already forbidden to him by virtue of being his sister, is not forbidden due to the additional prohibition, shall he not take, meaning a widow or a divorcee. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Rabbi Shimon says, one who eats an unslaughtered animal carcass, right? It's not kosher meat, even if it's a kosher animal, because it wasn't slaughtered in a kosher manner. If he eats this on Yom Kippur, he's exempt from kares for eating on the fast day because he already violated the prohibition of eating an unslaughtered carcass. As if you say this Baraisa follows the opinion of the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Shimon, don't they say, yes, a prohibition does take effect where another prohibition already exists. So if you ate an unshechted animal, right, it's not kosher because it wasn't slaughtered in a kosher manner, and you ate that on Yom Kippur when you're not allowed to eat anything, So did you violate two different laws? Yes. You are liable to bring a sin offering. If you did this unwitting, by the way, when you bring a sin offering, if you did it on purpose, then you have a different atonement to make. But if you did it unwittingly, that you ate unslaughtered, unshechted kosher animal on Yom Kippur, so you'd be liable to bring two different sin offerings. Rabbi Shimon would say one, because the animal was already prohibited to you as a nevela. You don't have to bring a sin offering for violating Yom Kippur, but he was in the minority on that. Now, applying that argument to this of the high priest who is now going to, marry somebody who's prohibited to him by two different laws, the Gemara rejects this. You can even say that this baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis who say a prohibition does take hold over where a prohibition already exists. As when the rabbis say that a prohibition takes effect where another prohibition already exists, that statement applies only when the second prohibition is a more severe prohibition. For example, eating on Yom Kippur, which takes effect in addition to a light prohibition, in this case, eating a nevela, a kosher animal that was not slaughtered in a kosher manner. But a light prohibition does not take effect in addition to a severe prohibition. So in this case, the prohibition of engaging in intercourse with one's sister, which is punishable by charis, is more severe than that of a widow or one divorced or a halal or a zona. These he shall not take, which is punishable by flogging. I'm almost done. Questions or comments? Please get them in. So there are those who say that Rav Sheshes said to the Tana as follows. In accordance with whose opinion is this? It is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis who say a prohibition takes effect where another prohibition already exists. And when the rabbis say that a prohibition takes effect where another prohibition already exists, that statement applies when the second prohibition is a more severe prohibition, which takes effect in addition to a light prohibition. But a light prohibition does not take effect in addition to a severe prohibition. As if it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, now that he holds that even a severe prohibition does not take effect in addition to a light prohibition, is it necessary to say that a light prohibition does not take effect in addition to a severe prohibition? There would be no novelty in this ruling of the Baraisa. And the Gemara rejects this. It is necessary, lest you say that a prohibition involving the priesthood is different. You might say that since there are many stringencies that apply only to priests, then with regard to prohibitions of the priesthood, a second prohibition should take effect in addition to a first one. And he therefore teaches us that Rabbi Shimon, in the minority, holds that the second prohibition does not take effect even when it is a prohibition addressed to members of the priesthood. That's what I've got for us today. Let's see if we've got any comments or questions on Kiddushin 76. Joseph, no generations of converts are fit for priesthood, but there are exceptions or limits. Am I understanding this? Okay, to marry into the priesthood, right? No one can become a priest that's not born a priest. Right? The only way for somebody to be a Cohen, to be a priest, is to be the son of a priest. He can lose that status, right? So if he marries, a woman who's unfit for him, then he loses. Then he's disqualified from serving the temple. He's still a priest, but he's disqualified from serving in the temple. No one can become a priest. What we're talking about is marrying into the priesthood. Now, a convert, let's say, who has a daughter, if the convert to Judaism marries a woman who was born Jewish, their daughter can marry a priest. She can marry into the priesthood. If a Jewish woman, if a woman converts to Judaism and she marries a man who was born Jewish, their daughter can marry a priest. If two converts who both converted have a daughter, their daughter cannot marry into the priesthood, but she could marry somebody who was born Jewish and their daughter. Right, so the granddaughter of the two converts who married could marry into the priesthood. Right, so that's what it is. But what they're saying is that the offspring of two converts cannot marry into the priesthood. Sharon, The terms halal and halala are confusing a bit to me. I initially thought it was a son or daughter of a Kohen and an unacceptable woman. Now it seems to be any person unfit to marry a Kohen. What is the clear definition of the term? What it seems is it's not somebody who is the definition of that a halal or a halala is unfit to marry a priest, right? But either but if she was born that way, meaning her father was a priest who married a woman unfit for him, so this young lady who was born to them, she will always be unfit to marry a priest. Her mother was not born a halala, but became one when she married a priest after as a second husband after she was divorced, for example. And then the priest should not have married her. He transgressed, she transgressed by entering into that union, and that makes her a halala. So now she's going to remain unfit to marry a priest, but even though she wasn't born that way, whereas her daughter from that union is born that way and remains that way. Tom, since we don't paskin from the Gemara, right? So what Tom is saying is just because we read a law along the way in these discussions, we don't say that's the halacha, right? That's why very often I say to you, where did the halacha came out, right? Where did the law come out? Because the sages will have very long debates, and sometimes even a debate, at the end of a debate, and they say, and the law is, and the law didn't end up that way because somewhere else the same debate was had elsewhere in the Talmud, right? Somewhere else in Babylonian history or in Eretz Yisrael, they came to a different conclusion. And so where the laws were all codified, right, was through the work of Maimonides, the Rambam, and then later in the Shulchan Aruch, right? And so that's how we know where all these debates ended up. So that's what Tom means. We don't paskin from the Gemara. We don't know what the law is just because we read a law in the course of a debate. So, says Tom, since we don't paskin from the Gemara, how does it become part of the halacha? Do the compilers of Jewish codes of law not refer to the Gemara and only use the Mishna? No. They do. It's just that you need somebody who, read everything. And I've read the whole Talmud. I could not. I'm no posek. I'm not a paskening rabbi. I'm not even a rabbi, right? You need, and a typical rabbi cannot paskin from the Gemara. You need one of these greats who has the whole tradition at his fingertips, and a staff perhaps. I mean, Maimonides didn't. He did it himself. But he went through the entire Talmud and went through all the debates, and not only the Talmud, right, but other materials as well. And so he knows that where the debate finally ended up and where, later authorities were embracing that ruling and using it, that we can reliably say that's what the law is, right? So that's how they came up with, the Mishnah Torah of Rambam, and he says what the 613 commandments are, and obviously beyond what the commandments are, there's many other laws that are by rabbinic decree. So, but where did the law end up? That's why we refer to the Shulchan Aruch, right, which is a very huge body of law. But most laws we don't have to look up all the time because there's not that many that we interact with every day. But when we're unsure, that's why we need to go to a paskening rabbi who can tell you what the law is. But he's not going to go to the Talmud to look it up. He's going to go to the Shulchan Aruch to look it up because that was Yosef Karo, right? Who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and then there was he actually wrote it for the Sephardim, and then the Ashkenazic Shulchan Aruch was I can't remember the guy's name, but it's been done for us, right? This work was done for us, and it was compiled for us, completely 500 years ago. New questions come up, right? And that's why you have, sort of governing bodies and Agudas Yisrael and the OU and other places like that. And then, you have to have, at the end of the day, this is why you have to have a Rav, right? You have to have your rabbi that you ask, just because different communities do have nuanced differences on the law. So, for example, Sephardic Jews will eat certain foods during Passover that Ashkenazic Jews won't, and so depending which community you're in, you have to know who to ask. But hopefully I've answered your question. That's what I've got for us today, And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Saturday night, after Shabbos ends here in LA. I think last week I got on before 8 p.m. And then I believe we changed the clocks Saturday night. So things will feel a little bit different.